India at 75 is a CII initiative, and the panel discussion is around the SDGs and the role of India Inc. at 2022 and beyond. However, this is going to be a lot more flexible. The IRC and Worldview believe that there needs to be a deeper connect between government, industry, education, and Gen Z to really drive the SDGs and the conversation around India at 75 years of independence, from the perspective of how each of these sectors can collectively contribute and shape India into a global leader in sustainable development. To that end, our panelists this evening are from diverse backgrounds, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to them. First, Mr. Arun Maira, former chairman, Boston Consulting Group. Can we please give him a huge round of applause? Mr. Maira is a thought leader. He has worked at various senior levels in the corporate sector, the social sector, and in government. He has valuable insights into how government, business, and civil society can work together to make the world better for everyone. He was a member of India's National Planning Commission from 2009 to 2014. He was also chairman of the Quality Council of India and a member of the National Innovation Council. Mr. Maira was chairman of BCG India from 2000 to 2009. He has served on the boards of several large Indian companies in the Tata, Birla, Godrej, Mahindra, and Hero groups. He is presently the chairman of HelpAge International, the global network working on the cause of the elderly around the world. He was on the board of and a senior advisor to the UN Global Compact and chairman of Save the Children India and the Axis Bank Foundation. He was a founding trustee of India at 75, and he is co-hosting this panel this evening. Mr. Maira has also authored several books on transformational change and leadership. These include Remaking India, One Country, One Destiny, Shaping the Future, Aspirational Leadership in India and Beyond, and Redesigning the Aeroplane While Flying, Reforming Institutions. His two most recent books, ladies and gentlemen, are very relevant to our discussions this evening. They are Listening for Wellbeing. They're up on the screen. This is called Listening for Wellbeing, Conversations with People Not Like Us. This book has a foreword by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Ratan Tata has written about this book on its cover. Arun's insights provide a unique perspective on collaborative solutions to address humanity's greatest challenges. His most recent book, Transforming Systems, Why the World Needs a New Ethical Toolkit, is hot off the press, published just last week. They're up on the screen, so you can find them. You can write down the name of the titles and find them. Please help me inviting Mr. Arun Maira on stage with an H1 India welcome of a loud round of applause. Thank you, Mr. Maira. It's a pleasure to have you here with us this evening. Joining him today is Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, Secretary, Information Technology, Government of Telangana. Mr. Jayesh Ranjan is a member of the Indian Administrative Services of the 1992 batch and works in the state of Telangana as the Principal Secretary of the Industries and Commerce and Information Technology Departments of the Telangana government. He holds a master's degree in psychology from Delhi University, a degree in business management from the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and a master's in public management from Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. He has also done short courses in the University of Birmingham on environmental policy analysis, the JICA Training Institute Tokyo on lake remediation, London School of Economics on globalization and leadership, Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University in public policy, and Swedish Institute Stockholm on sustainability and CSR. He is the All India topper of his IAS batch of 1992. He was awarded the World Bank's Social Capital Visiting Scholarship in 2002 and the British government's Gurukul Chevening Scholarship in 2005. He has done international consultancy assignments for the World Bank, UNSCAP, Sadatu Project of Mexico, and for international NGOs working for youth issues like YES, Inc. of the USA, and NMC from Italy. His last few assignments have been in the industrial promotion sector as Commissioner and MD of the Industries Department, Secretary in the Tourism Promotion Department, and Vice Chairman of the Hyderabad Urban Development Authority, or HUDA, for 2-3 years each, and various rural assignments in different parts of the state for over 12 years, working in diverse sectors like tribal development, natural resources management, poverty alleviation, and other related social development sectors. Sir, I invite you to join us on the panel. Please help me welcome Mr. Jayesh Ranjan with a big round of applause. Show him some H1 love, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So welcome. We're honored to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us. Joining Mr. Maira and Mr. Ranjan this evening is Ms. Anu Acharya from the World Economic Forum Young Global. She's also a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. She's currently the CEO of Map My Genome, which is India's pioneering personal genomics company with a vision to touch 100 million lives. From 2000 until April 2013, Ms. Anu Acharya was the CEO and co-founder of Ossimum Biosolutions. Since co-founding Ossimum in 2000, she has led the company through 3 strategic international acquisitions, 2 capital raises for equity investments, and launch of several innovative products, solutions, and services through its proprietary platform called Research as a Service, or RaaS. She serves on governing boards of NIBMG and IIIT Hyderabad, advisory board at Flagger Spot, Action for India and KIIT, board of mentors for IVCAP Ventures, member of CII National Committee on Biotechnology. Her awards and honors include special recognition in the leaders category by Indian Express, Pride of Telangana Award, IIT Kharagpur Distinguished Alumnus Award, Geo Economic Times Startup Awards, Women Ahead 2015, Young Leaders Forum of British High Commission 2013, Young Global Leader of the World Economic Forum Class of 2011, Biospectrum Entrepreneur of the Year, and Astia Life Science Innovators Award for 2008, Red Herring 25 Tech Titans under 35 in 2006, amongst others, because there's an etc. here. So can you please give Ms. Anu Acharya a huge round of applause and help me welcoming her on stage. Keep it rolling, keep it rolling. Thank you, Ms. Acharya. It's lovely having you here with us. Thank you for joining us. And joining our 3 panelists and co-host this evening is Mr. Abhijit Pai, President of the Puzzolana Group. Mr. Pai is a young entrepreneur actively involved in Hyderabad-based 5-decade-old family business house called the Puzzolana Group, which has diversified its interests in engineering, infrastructure, IT, FMCG, and the dairy industry. At the age of 21, he actively got involved in the family business and made vital contributions in bringing in the latest management practices and technologies for greater efficiency in the organization. Mr. Pai currently is the president of the Puzzolana Group, and he has been instrumental in the development of new acquisitions in the space of foundries. He has also been able to turn around sick companies into fast-growing ones. Moreover, he has invested in several startup companies and organizations beyond the activities of his parent company with an intention to develop several entry-level entrepreneurs focused on technology products serving the Indian consumer. He refers to this as his second act. In 2011, Mr. Abhijit Pai was the youngest to be elected and inducted in the AP State Council of Confederation of Indian Industry, or CII. He has been a member of Young Indians organization promoted by CII. Puzzolana is now the promoter company of Infrastructure Equipment Skill Council of India, aided by National Skill Development Corporation, an initiative of Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and co-convener of the Telangana Infrastructure Panel by CII. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Abhijit Pai on stage with a huge round of applause. And there you have it. We have our panelists and our co-host on stage. Welcome, everyone. We're delighted that you're all here and look forward to an enriching 90 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel for this evening.
Well, thank you very much for that rousing introduction. It made us all feel quite good.
Thank you so much. Jayesh, Anu, Abhijit, um, what are we going to discuss today for the next hour? The backdrop for this meeting is the United Nations, and we are here on this platform co-hosted by India at 75. So I'd like to say a few words about the backdrop, that is the SDGs, the United Nations SDGs, as well as India at 75. But before that, this is a very young crowd, a very, very young crowd, and you also look quite young compared to me. So I want to ask a question. How many of you are grandparents? Ma'am, you and I, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good, good. I'm not even going to ask the next question, how many of you are parents, because I expect that few hands are going to come up. Yes, a few hands will come up. Well, you know, you have grandparents though, all of you, and what grandparents love is to tell stories about their grandchildren. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me, and I will tell you one short story about my grandchild, who is now your age. Generation Z it's called, I believe. Yes. He wasn't that age at the time the story is. But first about SDGs. The United Nations' most momentous collaborative decision taken in the last 30, 40 years was the signing together by all nations of the Sustainable Development Goals, where all the nations agreed that they would work in their own nations and collaboratively together to address 17 goals. Goals to do with poverty, inequality, education, fair work, safe work, that's employment, water, clean energy. Issues to do with the condition of our societies and the condition of our environment. These goals on poverty or education or on fair work or women's inclusion cannot be isolated from each other. They go together. Education, skilling, jobs, women's inclusion. Similarly, the goals on the environmental side, water, clean energy, life on oceans, life on water or within water and life on land, you cannot separate them. The system is one system. And the natural system, the environmental system, and the social system also interact. So therefore, we can't work on these goals separately. We have to work on all the goals together to make the whole system better. So that's one characteristic of how we must go about meeting these goals, working together. In fact, the 17th goal, does anyone know what the 17th goal is? Partnerships. It says that we must work in partnerships. In fact, if we don't work in partnerships, none of the other 16 goals will be addressed. So partnerships are required between different stakeholders, between business, between government and civil society, between the people who are not yet with jobs and with the people who have the money to create the jobs. Partnerships between all stakeholders are required. And partnerships between different experts also. Experts in water, experts in health, experts in education, experts in markets, they must work together. And as the 17th goal says, perhaps we need to be much better at working in partnerships if we have to address these goals. India at 75 was formed some 15 years ago when a few of us felt that India, this big, beautiful, diverse country, democratic country, has much to do to achieve the aspirations of all its young people. In fact, the potential of India lies in its young people, and it's for the young people, our grandchildren as people would say, that we have to work together to make sure India is sustainable, environmentally and socially also. So India at 75 came together as an initiative to engage young people to work together as a movement, along with other citizens, older citizens, to shape India's future, just like our freedom movement was. It's citizens working shoulder to shoulder to achieve something that was very important for everybody. So with that, let me tell you my grandson's story. My grandson Viren, he lives in the United States, was born there, my son works there. And when Viren was 5 years old, which is many years ago now, 10 years ago, he came to India for the first time, and I thought I would show him India. Sorry, I'm not holding the mic and talking loudly enough. Yeah. My wife says that I talk too loudly, and I should shut up and let others speak, so I got a bad habit. Okay, yeah. So now I'm going to be wired up, but until then. So Viren comes to India, and I decide to take him. Car, I'm driving, and he's sitting at the back with his mother, and we drive into Luton's Delhi, a lovely place where the government of India works and people live. And we stop at traffic lights, as in India we have traffic and traffic lights, so we stop at traffic lights. And after we had moved from one traffic light, I heard this little voice, 5-year-old's voice at the back, saying to his mother, "Mom, the lady was knocking and no one answered her." So his mom asked who was knocking, and he said the lady at the crossing with the baby, she was knocking and no one answered her. There was a beggar woman who had been knocking, asking for attention, and well, I was busy, and I'm used to these knocks and ignoring them. And his mother said to him, "I'm very sorry, Viren, I didn't hear." So then Viren asks, he says, "Mom, why do they have to do everything on the street?" So she says, "What?" He says, "Mom, they're cooking on the street, they're sleeping on the street, they're playing on the street, they're even pooping on the street, Mom, why?" So Mom says, "Viren, we are lucky. We live in the United States. We have a big house with bathrooms and a kitchen and everything. These poor people don't have anything. They have to live on the street." That struck him, and he was very quiet. 2 years later, Viren came back to India, and we were driving in the same place, same area, when this voice was 7 years old, a little louder, and exploded. He said, "What is the government doing? Counting daisies?" Now, this was the time when we were having from the government a lot of data being thrown at people to say poverty has got reduced. You remember the Tendulkar lines and how many people have been lifted out of poverty by the good work done by governments and so on. And counting daisies. So my son said, "What do you mean counting daisies?" He said, "Look at all the poor people there. They're even more than they were last time on the streets there." And my son said, "Shut up, Viren, because your grandfather is now in the government." Now that shocked him, that his grandfather who he plays with could be this evil thing which he didn't quite understand called the government. So I told him at home that yes, I've been invited to join the Planning Commission of India, and we're doing a lot about trying to remove the poverty in the country, and he wanted to know more. So I took him to the Planning Commission, so as a young boy he could see what the Planning Commission was. Big offices, big people, a lot of people saluting, a lot of people around, and so. Now, his school in the United States, I think is a good school. They asked all the children what they had done in their holidays and to write an essay on it. So Viren wrote not just an essay on the Planning Commission, he wrote a book, a whole book on the Planning Commission of India in his handwriting with pictures that he drew. And I want to point it out because as I was reading that book, he started by calling it the Planning Commission, and by the 17th page, which was almost the last page, he was calling it the Planning Community. And in that last page, there was a picture of a big table in a big room, and a big man, maybe his grandfather sitting behind a table, and a stick man, a very thin stick man sitting on the other side. And the caption below said, "The planning community is a place where all the poor people can come, and someone will be there to listen to them, and then they will not be poor anymore." Being listened to matters so much. You feel some dignity. You feel someone's trying to understand you. And it never occurred. As they say, it was a child that pointed out that the emperor's not wearing any clothes. And my grandson pointed out to me that we in government, big chaps, a lot of resources, were really quite naked in terms of understanding the people of our own country. So I began to look around and saying, are we really listening? Certainly we as experts in the Planning Commission weren't listening to each other. The ministries were not listening to each other. The states felt the center was not listening to them. The people of the country, as Viren pointed out, was feeling that the government wasn't listening to them. Government and the business had a very fraught relationship. Business feels government's not listening to them. So it seemed everywhere that there was an absence of adequate listening. So we're coming back to that if India has to progress, if the world has to progress towards the SDGs where we want better partnerships, surely we'll need to be better at listening to people who are not like us, who have different points of view, who have different circumstances in life, and together we can understand the whole system, and together we can shape it. So I want to ask my colleagues here, partners here on this panel, this question: why are we not listening? Firstly, you may say, I am, but why are we not listening?
Yeah, thank you. Sir, in my 27 years now in the government, I have developed two very strong beliefs. The first belief is that you'll only be wasting your time if you try to boil the ocean. What it implies is that you don't try to do everything by yourself. You can't be a superhero. You have to select what are the important priorities which are aligned with your own interests. What is it that you want to do? And once you select that manageable, doable kind of an activity or an issue or a problem, then the second belief which I have developed is that no one today is a repository of all the knowledge and wisdom in this world. So obviously, if you want to do something on that issue, you need to also find people who have the answers, who have done it before. I mean, there's no need to invent the wheel again and again and again. There would be someone who has already tried out something. Perhaps it is in this country itself, somewhere else as well. So ideally, we have seen that the best solutions come when you have that openness to listen and receive and imbibe good practices, examples, even cases of failures, which also teach you a lot on what not to do, and so on and so forth. So these are two things which I very strongly believe in. But then to answer your question, that why is it that not everyone believes in it? Why is it that there are still lots of people who feel that perhaps they know everything, they can do everything by themselves? But two good things, sir. One is that the process of consultation, also very genuine consultation, shows that many things are actually working only if you have that consultative process. We have so many examples of very one-sided unilateral decisions being taken which have not either worked at all or they have not been sustainable. They might have given some very quick results, short-term results, etc. So the value of consultation, the value of collaboration, that is growing bigger and bigger, and it is becoming more acceptable today. And as you also know, since you have been a part of the Planning Commission, that lots of institutional arrangements today are made through which this kind of a consultation is mandatory. So for example, earlier I look after the industries subject in this state. Typically we acquire lots of private land to encourage industries for industrialization. At one point in time, this was a very absolute and very unilateral and a very blatant kind of a power in the hands of the government. If I want to take your land, I just need to sign an order and I can take your land and pass it on to an industry. But now the laws are such that without conducting a social audit or a public audit or a public consultation process, I just can't do that. So lots of changes, lots of reforms have happened. And gradually the number of people who still believe that unilateralism is the order of the day, that is going down and down and down.
Thank you, Jayesh. He is actually well known, and you are known for setting up processes for listening. Or at least we mandate the process for listening, but you in your state, you're doing very well in that regard because you believe it. But Anu, I want to ask you to my original question. We know we need to do more of it, but we don't seem to do it. Why don't we listen?
So I think, hello. Yeah, I think not listening stems from ignorance. And I think that ignorance comes from three major factors, at least the way I look at it. I think the first major part that influences us on whether we listen or not is parents. You know, what you learned at home. So for instance, I think in our house, my father used to encourage debates. and he would encourage to take opposite sides and make sure that we all come up with different things and then tell us what we learned from it. So I think one is the part your parents play. The second is, of course, your peers. So if all the peers that you choose are going to think the same way, I think you start forming that impression that that's all that matters in the world. And I think the third biggest influence, which unfortunately a lot of children don't do anymore, is reading books, and books of varied natures, because, I mean, from different categories, because I think that sort of opens up the mind that you might pick up something in some book somewhere that might be helpful. So I think in the end, listening, if we do listen properly, I think can result by benefiting that you will actually benefit by listening, because ultimately diversity of opinion, diversity of thought is actually going to benefit you, if not today, tomorrow. So I think some of the challenges are over there. And the second challenge, of course, is that people start to think that it's okay to just think for oneself. But maybe one quick short story where my father took us to a temple. And over there was this pujari who asked, he said, can you tell one thing that you want for yourself? And in this temple, it is granted. So it was quite interesting. My father said, I want peace in the world. And they said, no, something for yourself. And he said, well, if the world is peaceful, won't I be peaceful as well? So I think for me, it was a great point where I sort of understood that it's no man is an island. So if I think only of myself, I think I might do something that is, very selfish. But the truth is today, whether it is climate change, whether it is, education, whether it's something else, I think it influences all of us. And I think if we just remember that no man is an island, and it's not just about men or this thing, we also have to think about our planet. And if we don't start thinking about that, I think especially for the children sitting in the room, I think it is going to affect them. And it's going to affect them more than it affected our generation. So I'm very happy that at least I find a lot of children who are coming up with a lot of great ideas. I have 2 daughters. And I think I love the fact that, they have a lot of very interesting ideas about the world. And I hope that most of you in this room continue to do that and continue to challenge what our generation and the generations before us thought. Because you are going to live in a very different world than we are, than we have.
Abhijit, you're a successful entrepreneur. There is an image that people in business are very selfish people. So if you're a successful entrepreneur as you are, did you find or do you find the value in listening to people in society and others for their sake and for your sake?
So I think, the value is in listening, and we all believe that. But it's about how you communicate to the person you want to listen, right? Or to us as industry. Something that we've often found is the SDGs are well known, and we as industry want to implement it. But in order to implement it, we want certain helps from, government or, entrepreneurs to show us how to implement these, SDG requirements, right? And this is where I think new ideation, as to how, instead of, just telling us, there is a problem. How do we solve the problem is the bigger question, right? And as a young entrepreneur, I always want to know how. And we are ready, we're listening, and we're hoping that there is a voice out there somewhere that can help us, find this how. The government in its, on its role has actually talked about Skill India, Make in India, and all of this. But we need to now translate that to the next level. And in order to do so, I think thinking with communication, voice, and need have to be all bridged, and really the question for me is how do we bridge all of these as partnerships, not only the partnership between, these stakeholders, but the partnership about the problem and the solution is something that we need to, dwell upon and work towards. And if there is a solution of this sort, we're more than happy to listen.
So, okay, you're also affirming that these big issues of the SDGs, even if business feels that it's got the intelligence and the resources, it cannot address these issues without the cooperation of many other stakeholders, and they must feel that they've been understood, and therefore they will trust business to lead in the solutions. Okay? Until they are heard and listened to, what my grandson said, the people will not feel that you're on their side. Okay, so communication is the word you used. Now communication has two sides, yeah? The speaking side and the listening side. In fact, if no one is there listening, you can speak all you will, but there's no communication. So in schools, going to why there is, and I think you're mentioning that in your family experience too, in schools, I think we generally are teaching children to speak clearly, to articulate clearly, to express clearly, to win awards for being the best elocutionist, to win the awards of being the best debater who can demolish another person's arguments. It's all about the speaking side is being taught in schools, and we develop those skills because we're required to exercise those skills to get on in life. And now with the social media, I'm fearing that everyone wants to be noticed on social media, so there's more speaking happening and insulting speaking happening to get noticed. It's discouraging the ability to listen. What do you think, Anu?
I think the fact that people are not listening is really bothersome, because ultimately I think it basically means that you don't really have any respect for the other person on the other side. And I think at some point, just like we see on Twitter and Facebook and others, I think we get to a point where people forget what the subject is, and they fight because they want to fight and prove themselves right. And I think that becomes a big challenge, because you're trying to solve a problem, but ultimately it becomes an ego clash, and it becomes about being two parts of any problem, and you've forgotten what the problem is. And I think that's the same story, whether it is we are looking at it from a large nationalistic or a global point of view or otherwise, because when you are focused in trying to prove yourself, I think you typically forget what everything else is going on around you. And I think at that point, I think people end up doing things that are very foolish, which you can only have, you can only start to think about it later. So I would say that, especially with a lot of the people over here who probably post a lot of Instagram stories and Twitter feeds and others, I think what starts out as being a nice to have way of being able to connect, I think we end up becoming less connected to people, because we never want to see what they have to say about them. So I think making friends, for instance, was about understanding, was about being there for someone no matter what. I think social media, unfortunately, is doing something which, an unintended consequences, which is you just want to say what you're doing without a care of what the other person might be thinking. And I think that can have huge effects on how the next generation might potentially think. Hopefully it'll have a completely different view at some point, that it'll reach a point where people will start to realize and change that. But I think it is a serious problem that we all have to be aware that we might end up becoming more bipolar than we are, in terms
and there's signs of that, as you see the reactions to the big platforms to say, stop this hate and abusive messages. The people who are putting them out believe they're all right. To someone else, it's offensive. So who's going to judge who's being offended and why are they being offended, and is it right to say what is being said? You're in government, so I'd like you to come into that, please.
Can I add?
Yes,
can
please.
I add a small point,
Yes.
Mr. Maira? So while I agree with both of you that people who speak quite a lot, either abusive or in general, of course, instantly they get attention, they get noticed, but in the long run, they are also identified as people who are extremely shallow, as compared to someone who is a very deep listener, a serious listener, who contributes occasionally. His contributions actually are much more valued. In our government meetings also, I have seen these two kinds of people. Some people, the moment the discussion starts, they jump into, they start articulating, they tell all kinds of things. It appears very flamboyant. But in contrast, there is someone else who is quiet, who understands everything, makes up his mind, and then speaks. And at the end of the day, we always realize that he made a much more significant and a valuable contribution than someone who was just trying to appear flamboyant.
Very good. So what if What if schools were to give, every class were to give, at the end of every session, an award for the best listener in the class? The school were to give an award to the best listener in the school, to encourage people to appreciate and value those who are listening, not just those who are speaking. Why do we put it up as a solution? Yes? To change the nature of communication by emphasizing the ability to listen.
So, while there may not be any formal awards of this kind or recognition, but informally people do know that someone is speaking just for the sake of speaking and someone else is speaking in a much more serious way. So, informally everyone knows who is a real person with stuff.
Abhijit?
But to add to that, sir, listening and thinking as well, right? Right? Acting upon what you're listening is equally important. So I think the school definitely should, have some sort of, a leadership drive for, students that are thinking out of the box or thinking of solutions. As a country, we have 700 million youth, and we need to do something to empower them and give opportunity, give equality, like India at 75 and SDGs that we're looking forward towards. So in order to do so, I think we need to put the seeds for the fruit very early on. And entrepreneurship or thinking, to the whatever you're listening is a very, very critical, focal point to growth of the whole ecosystem, the society at large, thinking about the problems that we have, thinking about the opportunities that we have, because both of them are probably, at India we have the highest number of problems, but to me that's the highest number of opportunities as well, right? So thinking is critical, and if we can, stem thinking together with listening.
Right. I'm going to invite, let's listen to what's on the minds of the people. So just one short word from you.
Maybe one
Yes.
quick point. I know that some schools, and I know both my daughters went to Oak Ridge, one of the things they give them, even in like early grades, like, grade 1 or PP1, PP2 and all, where tags that they will say, I am respectful, and I think those are very good, because I think it sort of gives them a sense of pride, especially at that age, that, they're not talking about, I got 79 or I got 100 out of 100, but they actually were emphasizing on aspects like respect, like integrity and other things. I don't remember the exact words, but I think those kind of things probably should be made more in a more common this thing across and towards even slightly older classes as well, because I think that will sort of help in bringing some of these capabilities a little bit more value, but maybe add some stories to it as well.
Very good. Now, just here, because we're going to hear some thoughts from our young friends here, some questions. I believe you got some already. Have you? Then just show us what the questions are. And meanwhile, if there are any persons who have not posted the question but have a question, just raise your hands, and yes, we'll get a mic across to you. There's one there. Okay. What is your name and question? Please, yes. No, straight from there, please. Straight. There's a mic there. Give a mic. Give a mic to any of the people there. Meanwhile, get the questions up, please.
Let him ask first. Yeah, so my name is Arjun. I'm from Mumbai, and I'm in 9th now. Next year I'll be having my board exams. So, and like there's a lot of pressure like which I face, and even some of my friends who are in 10th who face the pressure of giving the board exam. And in this pressure they leave many things. They don't pursue their hobbies. They don't do what they like. So what do you feel about this, and what do you feel about our education system? So like so much emphasis on just 1 year of your full year of studies. So how do you, what do you feel about this?
Noted. We'll take a few questions. Yes, please. Who's got the mic? You got the mic at the back?
Yeah, I got the mic.
Good question.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Sahas. I'm a grade 9 student from Hyderabad. So sir, you have very rightly mentioned that great listeners, are great communicators. And I completely agree with that fact. And so, sir, my question is to all the panel members present there. As to today's generation has been mostly exposed to various technologies. Like this is the first generation that has been so exposed to this amount of technology. So do you think this use of technology by this generation will positively impact the listening communication system or will negatively impact it?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question? Yes, please.
My name is Jayant. I'm a grade 12 student. My question is regarding sustainable development.
Regarding, sorry?
Sustainable development.
Yes.
So nowadays we have a lot of startups that are eco-friendly and have a focus on helping the environment as well as getting profitable. So do you think that after a certain scale in this extremely competitive business environment, it is not possible to follow sustainable development by businesses and companies? So that was my question.
Okay. We've got 3 questions, huh? And I know, but I'm going to take 3 and then answer those. We'll take a few more quickly. Now, these 3 questions are sustainable development, business and so on, exposure to technology and the effect on the mind, the pressure in the education system to pass exams versus a person doing something that they really may feel good at. I'm just allocating them arbitrarily to the 3 of you.
I'll answer the technology one.
She wants to, okay, fine, and you can do. Go ahead.
So, nice question. I'll answer you. You asked about exposure to technology and is it a good thing or not. So let me share a very real example with you. I'm sure many of you would be active on PUBG. Some of you perhaps would be champions also. Now, about 9 months ago, or roughly about a year ago, a few governments in our country actually banned PUBG. Gujarat was the first to do. Then I think it was Maharashtra and 2-3 other states. There was lots of demand on us also. I'm the IT secretary of this state. So many representations came to me from parents and associations, etc., that we should also ban PUBG because many children are perhaps getting addicted and they're not able to concentrate on studies. But we decided not to do that. In fact, there was tremendous amount of public opinion on us that we should ban it, but we chose not to do it. And there was only one reason, at least the decision when it came to me, why should I ban it or not ban it? The thought process was like this. See, there are, for instance, in this room, there are more than 1,000 students, 1,500 students. But I'm very sure that even if all of you play PUBG, just a handful of you will get addicted to it. Many of you will use it to improve your maybe cognition skills, or someone will learn how to have a better high-hand coordination, better motor skills, ability to concentrate, and so on and so forth. For many people, it will work in a positive way. So there are lots of PUBG players in this audience. So I chose a good example. So, but at the same time, if a handful of children are getting addicted, it is something to do with them. What kind of people are they? What kind of families are around them? What kind of parental guidance do they get? So this is true of all technology. On the one hand, there could be an addiction. Many people still say that my child is 24 hours on the phone and playing this game or doing this, and they're not studying at all. But all these are exaggerations. I noticed that there are many children who use these devices or these technologies in a way which is much more useful and productive. Sometimes it helps them in their studies also, but definitely in the long run, they are going to benefit by this exposure of technology. And today, I'm sure all of you know this, that in our times, in the modern times, technologies have enabled finding solutions to some of the most complicated problems of our lifetime. So the more you become familiar with technology, unlike a generation older or 2 generations older who actually develop a fear for technology, the better the world will be. So my question is, my answer would be, my personal sense will be that we will do well if everyone is exposed to technology, and those stray cases, they have to fend for themselves.
Anu?
So I'll add one comment to this and then I'll go. So clearly, I think, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I gave her a phone, my big mistake. But she knows how to do a lot of these. She keeps using her phone. I use screen time. She figured out how to hack screen time. Every time I would do something, she would figure out how to hack. And so finally, I think she came to me one day and said, after a long listening, the only way you can control me is if you actually physically take my phone away. Right? So I realized that for some, I think we still have to do that because I think it is definitely has an addictive this thing to it. The second, I think the question that someone asked about our education system, and maybe I'll tell you something that, you know, we just had a reunion of 25th year in IIT Kharagpur of our own batch, and we've had a lot of people who are doing a lot of deep thinking about their decisions when they were your age. And it's quite interesting because especially going to IIT in those years, I think people basically spent a lot of time in just studying. But there were also many of us who just didn't study, right? I mean, not just study, but do other things. So I would say that, you know, at least on deep reflection, what most people thought was that if you only studied for a silver medal or a gold medal, or you studied for getting a mark, maybe you did well, got a job. But they are all trying to find something else that will give them happiness after they're getting closer to 50. So I would say that if you are currently, you know, whatever, 13, 14, 15 years of age, I would say that do something that not just is for studying, but also do something that will fuel your passion, because, you know, you will have so many things in the world that will be very different. So I would say don't give up on sports, not on music, not on books, because those are the things that are going to give you ideas. Because the people who do all of them, or some of them, are more likely to be more satisfied in life and happier. So I think the choice is yours, because changing the school systems are going to be harder for you to do, but it'll be easier for you to say that what can I do with that? So if you can still manage to proportion and make sure you can do all of it, or at least some of it, I think you will be happier 25 years or 30 years later. At least that's the value that at least that's the conclusion that we drew from looking at who all focused only on studies versus those who also found something else to be excited about. So that's your choice, I would say. Changing the school system is a good idea, but it'll take time.
Abhijit, I'm just ask you to just hold on 1 minute. Let's take 2 or 3 more, and I'm going to ask you to answer 2 or 3 questions together, right? Just see the thread in them. Yes, please. Yes.
Check. So we've already got a few questions in, and
Yes.
We'd like to pose them to you on behalf of
Sure,
the questions
okay,
along
good.
with their names. So we have a question from Arvind. The question is, what are the best ways and next steps to address income inequality, unemployment, and right skilling? The next question is from Sohom
I'll
Niyogi. The question is there a possibility that Indian political opinion unites through Gen Z?
What will, sorry, say?
Is there a possibility that the Indian political opinion unites through Gen Z, Generation Z?
Yeah.
We have a question. Do you see India changing completely to greener, more methods of energy and move to an all-electric spectrum by 2022? And another question by Taha Electric. The question is, do you think that India would be able to fulfill or complete all the sustainable development goals?
Okay, so we're coming to, but let me take the 4 questions. And the first one was about inequality, unemployment, and skills. I'm going to put it straight to you because India 75 agenda started with, and I know you're doing a lot of work in that.
So I'll actually answer the electric question first. If
You
that's
like
fine
that
with you.
one, okay. Will India become green by 2020 and all electric by 2020, which is the India 75 time almost around the corner, right?
So I think the earlier question as well, right?
Okay, yes,
I
put
was
all
just
3
asked
together,
that.
yes.
So I think electric, the fact that he's thinking about, you know, going electric and finding a solution is also stemming from the fact that there is communication and technology out there which is making him think. So this is an ideal example of what we ought to be having in this country, and more so, right? Will we reach electric by 2020? Probably not. But are we in, or we won't, but are we in the right direction to working towards finding solutions for electric consumption? Yes. I think the government has very clearly had a lot of policy, both on the center and the state. And there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit around finding solutions. The key really is how do you manage your investments. I think you need to just find that community that believes in the same problem, and there are enough and more people looking to solve the same problem, because it is an SDG for them within the ecosystem, in addition to, being a larger problem, but even within their ecosystem. For instance, a Bangalore or a Hyderabad, we are very, very, very populated cities and growing very fast. So how do we address the last mile problem in an energy efficient way? So there are many low-hanging fruits there, and with ideas and young minds like this, anything is possible. And don't think about profitability right now, think about the solution. If the solution is good enough, the money will flow. So always think about finding the right solution for the problem that you wish.
Yeah, like your last sentence, but don't think about the money first. Think about the solution. I grew up and worked 25 years with the Tata Group as a young person before I went out into the bigger world of consulting and back into government. And G.R.D. Tata, our chairman, used to say that whenever he had a difficult decision to make, he would first ask himself, what is good for the country, India, and then second, what might be good for Tatas. And he said somehow, Myra, or he told all of us, whenever I took a decision which was good for India, it somehow always turned out later to be good for us also. So think of the bigger picture and what's good for others. As Mahatma Gandhi said, think of the poorest person first, what's good for that person, it will be good for you somewhere in the future. Don't be selfish, care for others. A very important question to me, very intriguing question, would Indian political opinion unite with Gen Z? So what's occurring to me is, what is Gen Z's political opinion? Has Gen Z had a conversation? Can it have a conversation? Will it come to a consensus? Or what is its political opinion? And if it had to have that conversation, what technologies that you have learned here about how to conduct discussions in the UN format, a difficult discussion, or what you know how to do on social media, what technology would you use to come to a consensus about Gen Z's political opinion? I'm almost throwing the question back at you, but can you anticipate some challenges?
So, one, I'm not sure we want a united political opinion in the first place, right? Because I think the fact is that, we want differences of opinion within the government, because if we didn't have that, I think we wouldn't be a democracy at all. So, but I think the intention probably was something else, which was that can Gen Z maybe make certain changes? Now, whether it was the Arab Spring, whether it was a few other revolutions that have come about by people just like you all, right? So it is about being able to use technology to be able to affect change. And maybe all the motor skills and other things that you've just developed in playing games and many other things could be used to a very good use if that's something that you can make as a possible listing to influence the government. I wouldn't still want a united government. I would still want a government that has, or a parliament that has a lot of opposing ideas as well. Because without that, I think we wouldn't be hearing the needs for all the different kinds of people that we have within the country, because while Gen Z will be an important part of the of the country, I think there are many other segments as well. But I would strongly encourage that if you look at the sustainable goals that we have, and we are very, very poorly behind in many of them, especially health, which I care about. If y'all can create a stink about it using technology, I would be very happy about it.
I'm going to ask Jayesh a question, because he is in the government and very conscious, as he said, about listening to other people and the stakeholders. The difficulty I had when I was in the Planning Commission, for example, we recognized, as my grandson put it, you better listen to the people. So we invited civil society and young, and we did that in India 75, asking the young people to tell us what should be the agenda. And this is just an instance I'm pointing out. So we had, in the Planning Commission, we want to hear from people who are looking after the issues of children. And there are many organizations, Save the Children, and they go on and on. Let's ask them what the government's agenda should be to take care of the children. So we had about 30 odd organizations who came up. Different brand names, and they all said they represent millions of children. So now we got different voices. And then we asked them that, look, this is very confusing. Why don't you, 30, have a discussion amongst yourselves and tell us in one voice what is the best solution for the children of India? And they said, Mr. Myra, what sort of world do you live in? We are all very devoted, passionate, and ego-centered people also. You think we're going to agree with each other? And so when you're listening to people, do you find this as a challenge that people are not in agreement themselves?
So I have a contrary view. Actually,
Yes.
there are some very good examples. See, we all know our country went through the election process recently. We had parliament elections few months ago. And typically, as all of you would know, parties come out with an election manifesto. If they are voted into power, what will they do? So one very important national issue, which is of immense importance, is how do we handle the demographics that we have today. As you know, more than 65% of our population is below 25 years. So how do we reap the best possible dividend out of this demographic? And if you look at, and obviously skilling is a very important issue. This was alluded to in one of the questions also. So if you look at the manifestos of at least the top 5, 6 national parties and the regional parties, you will find amazing amount of similarities. All of them have spoken about how this skilling requires a micro level solution and how industries must collaborate with the government in giving those solutions and how quality of skilling program also matters and so on and so forth. So 7, 8 recommendations which have come out in terms of demographic dividend, skilling are more or less exactly the same. So in that sense, one feels very optimistic that there is some kind of a consensus. But on certain other issues which are much more political in nature, for example, not to raise any controversy or anything, but let us say what happened in Kashmir or what is going to happen in Kashmir, there will be definitely a whole range of opinions. Some will be in support of the government line, some will be against it. But as long as there is a good amount of consensus on matters which are of immense national importance, one should feel optimistic about it.
I think, therefore, the thing is that we can have different opinions, and we should, as you say, in a democracy, have different opinions. That's a diversity of which creativity will come. And we should respect different opinions. It's the nature of the discourse amongst us, the respect that we give to people who have other opinions. Let's stop having shouting matches on television and let's stop insulting each other on social media. Let's respect others' opinion. Then we are a deep, good democracy. We've got just 5 minutes left. I'm going to request each of you, if you had to give personal advice, it's not now telling us the solutions, that you're giving advice which every young person here can say, this has helped me. A personal advice to a young person who at this stage is feeling the need to contribute to making the world better, big problems, about himself or herself. Personal advice, what would you suggest? Should I start with you?
I'd say travel India, find out what it is that troubles people, connect that to your own SDLG, right? We have a self-development goal for ourselves, and just go through that journey, because in the journey you will ask questions and you'll find answers. And you know, that is something I did very early on in my life, and it's something that I took away a lot of knowledge from, and I continue to do that to date. You know, I choose a certain backward part of the country, go there, spend a week or two, embrace the culture, understand, what is in their minds, speak to the people. My last, expedition was Ladakh, for instance. So it is an experience, it is a memory, but in the same time, you are working towards an SDLG that, you might have for your own company or for your society or your family, and then work towards that.
Thank you. Anu?
So I would say to follow your path and your passion, because I think my parents allowed me to do what I wanted to do. And I think that has tremendously helped me, especially I think for kids growing in this age. I think it'll, you'll have AI coming over in a lot more stronger way. There'll be robotics. So don't just look at a career that is going to give you the highest salary or a career that is currently the best, because in the end, if you follow what truly drives you, I think you will be able to go to places and be able to make a difference without thinking about the consequences of short-term gain. So think long-term, not just short-term.
I would urge all of you to become change makers. If something bothers you, don't wait for someone else to come and do it to fix it for you or sort it out for you. Think of in which way you yourself can find a solution. See, some of the technology wizards of our times, whom we all idolize and whose products and services surround our lives all the time, people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, I'm sure you know this, that all of them, the three of them, they got admissions in the best universities of the world today. Zuckerberg and Bill Gates were admitted to Harvard, Steve Jobs was admitted to Stanford, and they all dropped out because they were possessed by something which was much, much bigger than a Harvard degree or a Stanford degree. So this is the way life is going to be in future as well. As long as you have that commitment that I'll take responsibility of finding this solution. And this is a kind of a habit. If you develop this habit of inquiry, of thinking, of finding solutions, tomorrow, whichever profession you choose to be, you will be a really valued and a great person, either in that organization or in that community or or for the society at large. So be a change maker as quickly as you can.
Good. Now, to be a change maker, this summary, Mahatma Gandhi, it would be a silly question to say who has not heard of Mahatma Gandhi. One of the big change makers of our country, who has been a role model for making change, big, deep social change around the world. A leader, a change maker, who is a leader? Is she or he who takes the first steps, that's you lead, towards what? Towards something that he or she deeply cares about. It must be something that you have a passion for, and in ways that others will wish to follow you. Why would others wish to follow you? They're not compelled to follow you, not hit on the head to follow you, but wish to follow you if they know that the cause that you are going towards is their cause also. If you listen to them and say this is their cause, so they follow you. Mahatma Gandhi had this. You see his statue marching with a danda, old man. Behind him, Indian women, men are following him. Why? Because the cause that he was pursuing was their cause. They knew it. And so they voluntarily, they wish to follow. So you can make, even though you have no money like he had no money, you have no big position like he had none, you can lead a movement of change if you find out what you deeply care about, and it's not a selfish care. You understand other people's needs, what they care about, and then you take the first steps towards something that collectively you all wish to have. So be a leader, step out, have courage, and then you will change the world. The SDGs shall be achieved. Thank you.